Hi everyone, and welcome back to Mission 1820 and this week's episode of Have You Ever Wondered? If you're just joining us, we're in a series called Books of the Bible, and what we've been doing is just giving introductions into each book of the Bible in just 5 minutes or less. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get to this week's book. This week we're in the Book of Lamentations. Now this is the 25th book of the Bible, and it's also the third of the 5 major prophets of the Old Testament. Now, the Book of Lamentation is describing the funeral of a city, and that city is the once proud city of Jerusalem, which now is lying in complete rubble by the invading Babylonians. In a 5-poem dirge, the author is expressing his deep emotion after seeing the slaughter of many of his very own people, as well as the enslavement of others and the abject despair of those few survivors. The book is written in poetic form, which expresses the deep grief over the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple. Now, the English title of Lamentations comes from a Greek verb which means to cry aloud. Now, this accurately describes the contents of the book. The author of the book has traditionally been attributed to the prophet Jeremiah, though as you read, you're going to find out he's not named anywhere in the book. However, the Greek translation of the Old Testament, or what we call the Septuagint, does name Jeremiah as the author. And we also get some pretty strong support in that by 2 early church scholars by the name of Origen and Jerome. The book was written in 586 BC, just shortly after the fall of Jerusalem. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the book is a very short book. It's just 5 chapters, or some like to call them 5 poems. They were written by Jeremiah, and the way we can break them down is like this. In chapter 1, Jeremiah is mourning for Jerusalem and Judea as it does lay in ruin by the raid and destruction of Babylon. In chapter 2, Jeremiah is describing the anger of the Lord who brought that judgment to the wicked land, just as he had warned. In chapter 3, we do see Jeremiah expressing his troubled spirit and suffering because he too is afflicted by this, because this is his hometown that has been pillaged. And on the other hand, he does remind us in verses 19 through 23 that God is faithful and that he will restore and bring his promise to pass. Chapter 4, we read that God has brought justice and he has ruled mightily against Jerusalem. In chapter 5, we read about Judah's appeal to the Lord for forgiveness and restoration. You see, the nation was warned about their sin and disobedience. They were also warned about the penalty of the coming judgment of God, which caused Jeremiah to grieve deeply because of the destruction of Jerusalem and the devastation of his nation of Judah. This book clearly shows us the serious consequences of sin, but it also shows us how we can still have hope in the midst of tragedy because God is always able to turn it around for good. You know, one of the things I love about the book is that Jeremiah at the beginning of it has some very strong laments, but he rightly ends the book with an appeal to the Lord for restoration. You see, we're all going to face tragedy in this life, just as Jeremiah did. But what we need to remember and understand is that in the midst of our afflictions and trials, there is still hope in our mighty God. So with that, I hope that this introduction is going to encourage you to read the Book of Lamentations and also to learn exactly what it means to grieve with God. So God bless and thanks for watching.